Talking about Celeste feels weird, because I would argue that this game sucks. Literally, since the game launched in 2018, I didn't like this game. But when I finally got around to playing it, yes, I fell in love with it, going so far as to even platinum it. So, what was the reason? How could I hate a game so much without even playing it? The answer is prejudice. Yeah, I feel shame of that answer, but yeah, it's the truth. Allow me to explain. I was never a fan of platformers, they always seemed super simple and repetitive, and I saw no distinction between games. I used to think, oh, look at this one, the character jumps a little bit different, and that was it. Though my prejudice doesn't come from a place of malice. When I was a kid, most of the games that were targeted to my age, or the ones that my parents would allow, were platformers. And since they were for kids, they ended up being simple. The problem is, I've always played games that were more advanced to my age, thanks to my friends having older brothers. I used to play Kingdom Hearts and No More Heroes at their place, while at my house we used to have Barnyard for the PS2. Pogger's game, by the way. So as I grew up, I never really thought to give this genre another try. Now, when Celeste was released, all of my friends used to talk about it, and the game was also notorious around the internet. But again, my prejudice was still there. I knew at the time that the game was praised for its gameplay and emotional narrative, but I had my doubts about both. The gameplay was because of what I explained before. I mean, how could a platformer have insane gameplay when all you do on those games is jump? And the second was because I didn't trust gamers praising emotional narratives. In my defense, I do believe the medium of games was, and is still somewhat is, lacking in regards to tackling more intimate and heavy emotional subjects, when compared to mediums like books, theater, and cinema. And at least in my experience, most certified gamers lacked exposure to those other medias, making it easier to impress them. Because even if the subject is handled poorly, they probably won't know better since they have nothing to compare it with. Now, this is also because our medium, video games, it's still really young when compared to literature and cinema. So most game developers are still finding ways in which the unique characteristics of this interactive media can enhance the storytelling aspects. Now, I know games that do a great job of tackling heavy and complex subjects exists, so there wasn't a doubt about our medium. It was more a doubt about whether the vast majority of people had the necessary expertise to judge the narrative presented. And I'm not joking when I said the prejudice got the best of me, since the game was released in 2018, but I only got around to playing it in 2023, half a decade later. And only because, even after all those years, people were still talking about it. Hell, even I'm making a video 7 years after its launch. That is the impact this game has on people. But I'm glad I did, because even though I'm way more trustful towards other people's opinion, even believing that the less technical and more personal a review is, the more the person believes in what she's talking, Celeste still was the game that broke my prejudice towards platformers, and as of 2025, my library of those games keeps growing. So, hear me out while I explain to you how Celeste humbled me in the platformer genre, showing how engaging and difficult the genre can be. I believe the genre can be broken into two: explorative and speedrunner. Explorative platformers are the ones where the game tries to keep you engaged by feeding your curiosity, and I think the best example is Mario Odyssey, where the main focus of the game is finding all the different moons, replaying levels, and trying new routes, with every new power-up making you think of previous places where it could be used, and every little thing out of place gets your attention. On the other hand, speedrunners are the ones where the game presents harder and harder challenges, where you have to become skillful in every movement mechanic in the game. Celeste is a good example of a speedrunning platformer. Almost every move gives an insane amount of acceleration, allowing you to keep momentum or change directions with ease. The game plays around fast-paced movement, incentivizing you to act on your reflexes rather than planning it. Of course, all games in the genre possess elements of both, as Mario Odyssey has some timed challenges, incentivizing speed, and Celeste has strawberries and other hidden collectibles, incentivizing exploration. As you can imagine, most platformers I played as a child would fit more into the explorative design. So this was my first time experiencing the speedrunner side, and I loved it. It feels like the game is challenging you, but also providing opportunities to think about optimization. Even if you can do things correctly, there's always the feeling that you also could have done it faster. The game designers even going as far as keeping a previous exploit in the game, while giving the players a tutorial on how to perform it in the DLC, and creating levels that utilize this new form of movement that covers way more distance. Had they not been thinking about speedrunning, I don't think they would keep an exploit into the game, much less making a speedrunning technique mandatory in new levels. Every screen in Celeste works as a separate level inside a bigger map, so when you finish a screen, it is considered a level complete, giving you a checkpoint into the next zone. If you die, you don't begin the entire level from the start, but rather from the screen you are currently in. This design is what hooked me, because rather than taking my time in each level, I rather began experimenting and going by feeling, taking every single opportunity for a shortcut, gambling on whether or not I would reach certain walls or platforms, since not only did the characters respond easily to every move, but also because even if a mistake occurs, I would not be punished. There are no left counters ticking down, and because you begin right at the same screen, there is no wasting time reaching your previous checkpoint, so dying never feels boring or irritating. And in a way, it even allows you to go faster in the parts that you've already completed, since now, rather than barely passing through it, you are starting to master every single jump. The game is utilizing your muscle memory to the fullest, rather than relying on a more logical and planned approach, which works in favor of the game's pacing. Of course, the game also knows not to put all its eggs in the same basket. For example, even though most of the game might incentivize you to act fast and experiment, it also knows when to enforce perfection. Let's take a look at the strawberries, which is a collectible present in other levels. Strawberries don't give you much as a reward, it basically gives you a different image at the end of the game, and it also serves as a requirement for unlocking the hardest level. It's a way for the game to say, hey, if you haven't been able to acquire all these strawberries, I don't think you're ready for this. So this enforces that the player takes on all the other difficult challenges before running into the hardest one yet. But more interesting is how they appear on each map. Strawberries are normally positioned in a place that goes against the completion of the level, forcing you to take a detour to acquire them. But touching the strawberry is not enough to gather it. After that, you need to make contact with some sort of ground for the game to register it as collected. So, you have to be careful about the route, since not only you have to find a way to reach it, but then you still have to find a way to safety. This guarantees perfection, as you can't just recklessly gather the strawberry, as most of the time, reaching a safe place takes a lot of reading the environment, especially in later stages. And on the concept of recklessness, your dash also only refreshes if you make contact with the ground. So while being a tool that gives you a lot of speed, working in harmony with your speedrunning tendencies, it also ensures that you don't waste it. Sometimes the game will make certain walls or platforms only reachable if you still have a dash saved. So if you've made a mistake and used it before, the game is saying, yeah, don't even bother and try again. You won't conquer me like that, now do it as we intended. Also, remember when I said you feel incentivized to go fast since every screen is small and restarting is not punishable? Well, what if we inverted the design? What do you think it would happen? Well, if a short level incentivizes speed and experimenting, a long level incentivizes perfection and staying inside a safe route, since dying will punish you way more. And the game takes advantage of that. In the beginning, the game might be more friendly and give you different checkpoints through a long level, basically working as a big arrangement of shorter levels, but with fewer checkpoints spread around. This is interesting because you became accustomed to shorter levels. So these longer levels, even if sometimes easier, just makes you uncomfortable, and you commit way more mistakes since rather than jumping and playing slowly and safely, the anxiety and demons inside your head are telling, jump, dash, I'm sure you can make it to that wall and skip this slow and tedious wait. I'm sure you can scrape 2 seconds from this segment. I'm fine with the restraint of freedom in certain levels, as this mix-up of immense player control and immense designer control works to not make the game too repetitive or boring. Making these sorts of games too punishable can make people lose interest, as they feel too restrained and forced to play the levels only in the way the designers intended. But if the game possesses no punishment at all, the player loses the feeling of higher stakes and avoiding a bad outcome by their skills alone. But for the game not to get too easy as you grow accustomed to its skills, it adds new mechanics, throwing your comfort zone out of the window, as each design works in different aspects of the game. Let's take a look at most of these designs and see how they change the way the player might approach the game. First is the classic moving platforms. Since they are moving, it means that the arc of movement you have to do might change. In some instances, it becomes outright unreachable if you mistime it. This ensures the player develops their skill with timing, since understanding when is the correct moment to jump or dash can be the difference between restarting the level or reaching a checkpoint. Not only that, but later in the game, there are also platforms where if you jump at the correct timing, it throws you way higher in the air, working as a trampoline. Now, even a simple design like this has insane depth in this game. One is the previous concept, where for you to reach a certain place, you need to time it to jump as high as possible. But also, they invert this, and sometimes you might need to avoid the trampoline effect and minimize your jump, as to ensure you don't hit your head in a spike and die. Lastly, they make some of these moving platforms a one-time interaction, meaning if you get the timing wrong, you will not be given a second chance. And let me tell you, if you only have one chance to do it right, you are normally going to fail, since these situations will make you too anxious, ensuring you also have to start working on controlling your emotions and understanding them. Remember this, since I'm going to talk more about the emotional side of the game in the future. Now, there are still a lot of other mechanics that the game introduces to you. Eventually, you will gain a double dash, so your sense of what is reachable now changes, since the distance you can travel is now bigger. This is sometimes bait, since remember what I said about sometimes the game wants you to reserve a dash for specific segments? Well, having two dashes might make you less careful, using it in unnecessary situations just because you can, and by the time you realize your mistake, the game punishes you, ensuring the lesson is learned. There is also a wall bounce, which not only ensures you don't play safely, preventing you from hugging a wall before jumping, but also helps you in maintaining momentum, allowing you to bounce higher and farther off the wall. If you ever tried to stop at the wall to read your trajectory, it robs you of the only trajectory you could have made. And the best part of it all is that you have to do this fast, since you need to change the direction you're facing and pressing jump. A test of your reflexes! There is also a feather power-up, which makes you control kinda like those snake games from mobile phones back in the day, which is hard to control, and because you are not accustomed to that amount of 360 movement, you are bound to commit some mistakes. There are plenty of other mechanics, such as the bubbles that work as one-time dashes. They give you a slow fall and you have a limited time to stay inside of it, making you again act fastly. But most of them will strengthen some sort of previous points mentioned, such as working on your timing, your patience, your anxiety, your sense of distance, your sense of speed, and allowing you to move in a new way. Also, I don't want to spoil every single mechanic of the game, since I think discovering them and understanding their strengths and mastering these new skills works to give you an amazing sense of power that I don't want to steal from you. By the way, the game is not only visually gorgeous for the sake of it, but it presents a lot of visual clues as to where the possible routes are, removing a little bit of the weight from your shoulders when it comes to routing a new way, but also not making it that visually obvious as to remove your sense of discovery. One thing that can also be praised is the amazing work they did utilizing contrasting colors. This might sound dumb, but in a game where going fast is your focus, being able to easily identify different elements on the screen helps to prevent players suffering. For example, if you look at the first level, our character has bright red/orange hair, and the level mostly consists of different values of blue. These colors are insanely contrasting, allowing you to easily spot yourself on the screen, even without focusing too much on your character, giving you the benefit of focusing on your trajectory and using your vision to scout the path ahead. But there will be things that feel out of place in some levels, creating curiosity in the player to check if there's a hidden level or segment there. This feature appears early in the game, and since we are at our most crucial stage, the learning stages, it takes the opportunity to plant this concept in your head, ensuring we try to visually discern elements in the levels going forward. Even though I'm not proficient in arts, I'm pretty convinced that this game is a work of art. From the colors to the different themes and designs in each level, to their desire to explore emotional concepts to even their music. And even though I lack in the visual department, as a musician and primarily a drummer, oh my god, what an insane soundtrack! This makes sense, as I believe music is one of the mediums of art where we are mostly connected with our emotions. With it being used to create courage in people before they went to war, being used to ease our feelings when someone passes away, to being used to express our love to someone. And since the game wants us to connect with its mostly emotional narrative, tackling subjects such as anxiety, social pressure, expectations, self-doubt, depression, grief, and anger, investing in a soundtrack is a good decision that ensures not only it is easy for these emotions to connect, but they also hit even deeper. Well, let's talk about the emotional narrative that takes place in Celeste, since I've dodged the subject long enough in this script. Maybe as a way to not confront the mistake I made when I was younger, by criticizing without knowing the depth the game possessed. Or because I might feel unprepared to tackle such a developed and well-explored narrative. Maybe the one who possessed the shallow emotional understanding was not the games I played, but rather I lacked the knowledge to explore the depths presented to me. I have to say it. I believe Celeste connected with people because it understood some of the more pressing matters younger adults are facing nowadays. For example, Madeline, the main character, portrays self-doubt, self-hate, anxiety, and depression, with her desire to reach the top of the mountain working as a channel for her to dump her frustrations and find a semblance of worth/meaning. Thinking that if she proves to herself she's capable of climbing the mountain, she will shut up the voices inside her head and have more confidence in herself. Also, Badeline, which is an imaginary goth version of Madeline, works as a nice visualization of Madeline's self-doubt and hate, being a character that represents that voice always trying to drag us down. I think this works in such an interesting way, since their relationship is even implemented as gameplay mechanics. In earlier levels, Badeline is an active force of evil. She imitates your movement, basically seeking you, and if you touch her, you lose. At this point in the story, Madeline is trying to ignore and escape from the thoughts presented by Badeline, so we as the player have to navigate the levels in a way that represents those feelings. In later stages, after suffering a setback in our journey, we are faced with the fact that even when Badeline wasn't present, we still weren't able to succeed. And so the character starts to understand that she can't ignore her doubts, as they can also be used to help her. For her to be complete, she has to acknowledge this side of her. And this is translated beautifully in gameplay, as now Badeline works as a power-up in the game, actively helping us and even being the reason we can double dash. As a good side note, even if the game portrays a lot of emotional turmoil, they don't make the protagonist carry all the burden. For example, Theo, a character who has to deal with societal pressures, since his sister is always receiving praise like she has life figured out, making him feel like he has never been able to live up to other people's expectations. His objective in climbing the mountain is way different, and he doesn't care all that much about completing the climb, but rather doing something that he actively enjoys and thinks is right for him. He's using it as a first step to decide what he wants to do with his life, rather than doing what people tell him to do. Also, spoiler warning, I'm going to talk about the last stage right now. On the last stage, we are presented with one of the heaviest subjects yet, and it is grief, the emotional process one goes through when losing someone dear to them. Granny is dead, and she was a character we had grown close to along our journey. She was one of the people responsible for confronting our comfort zone and the character's bad habits, actively helping with our growth. I don't really want to talk that much, as this last stage in the game is really long and is a really good emotional journey for you to embark upon, but I do want to highlight some interesting designs. One is Madeline's obsession with following a bird, which she believes is a message from Granny. This obsession is really detrimental to her mental health, as even Badeline tries to interfere, to the point where they even break their bonds. and you lose the ability to double dash, only returning in later moments. The second is, since we as the player had grown accustomed to these challenges, even if the game is giving us some insane level design, we are now stubborn enough to not give up. And we act as a vessel to carry Madeline obsession in completing these levels and reconnecting with Granny. And well, I think it was interesting. Grief is never an interesting subject and is probably something most people will struggle with. So interesting, the most difficult levels are also the ones that, in my opinion, tackle the most difficult subject. I think Celeste is one of the most interesting games from this generation, and in the end, emotions are something personal. I might have connected with the game in a certain way because of the traumas that I exclusively had in my upbringing, and to the things I went through in my life. But your journey with the game might be completely different, so rather than spoiling every single detail, I hope my review presented enough connection with the game to show to you that yes, if you give this game a try, there is a high chance you will also connect with its themes and create your memories. This work is not only insanely good to play, given the care the developers put into designing levels and mechanics, but also by making these gameplay features enhance the emotional value you will encounter within the game. I'm thankful Celeste exists, and I'm thankful you watched this video until the end.